So the Dictionary of Astrology is a phenomenal series of books. It's 3 volumes. And what he did was Dr. Baker took the 500,000 words of the English language. Took him 7 years to do it. He maintained for 7 years what is called continuity of consciousness. Continuity of consciousness is a reality that we can experience when we have created what the Theosophists and Eastern mystics call the Antakarana. It's a Hindu Sanskrit word, and it means that it's a bridge of consciousness between the lower mind and the soul. It's an incredible thing when you experience it, because what happens is you are aware, just like I said about Baker, 24 hours a day. You can sleep and you're aware. You're aware of your surroundings. It's a great time to astrally project. We have a book written by Baker on astral projection techniques. It's called Techniques of Astral Projection. Extraordinary book. It's the best book of its. And he gives safe practices that you can use to astrally project. I have had incredible experiences in astral projection. I've been in situations where I have projected into the Akashic record as far back as 80,000 years ago, and have even had experiences of witnessing the birth of the universe through what's called the Big Bang. Big Bang experience. But anyway, so Baker was aware every day for 7 years. It took him to take the 500,000 words of the English language and to apply astrological aspects to the words to create sentences. There's a glass frame up there, Randy. Could you reach there? Don, reach that. See that wooden frame up there? It's got some writing on it. That's it right there. Here. You reach that? Hand that to me, and I'll read it here for our friends who are on the Zoom lecture. It's a statement back in 1991 that Baker received. It's sacred to me, and I have several copies of it throughout the house. But it's a statement about the new astrology. This astrology will be the astrology of the Aquarian Age. There'll be another astrology that will supersede this, but they'll work in unison. And we call it, in the English ashram, we call it quantum astrology. Anyway, the statement reads thus: I am working on the clefs and symbols of a universal language of the causal world for expressing all intellectual concepts, artistic values, and spiritual encounters, reducing them thus to a common denominator, an astrological key. The meaning of life cannot be taught in any other way. It is a lingua sacra, meaning a sacred language, and indeed it is. You'll see tonight the incredible spiritual, linguistic sacredness of this language. In the expression of this universal language, we are synthesizing the new universal religion for all of mankind. This was a statement from the Nirmanakaya, who was Plato. So he wrote these dictionaries. This one is the volume 1 is pretty much just like a regular dictionary where you can look up a word and see the aspect. The other 2 dictionaries, these aspects accompanied with the houses and the sign on the cusp creates sentences. And we're going to talk about this. We did a little bit of this when we did Fauci's, and we'll kind of go over some of that tonight. We don't have much time. We only got about 40 minutes. And then we have to leave a couple minutes for question and answers. Actually, we got about 35 minutes. But I think I can get through it to the point where there'll be some clarity to what we're talking about. This was not an invention of my mind. These were aspects that I looked up in the Dictionary of Astrology, and I just I wrote them out. I sometimes call it may or may not be quantum astrology. But Joe Biden, the thing that struck me, and as I said, there's a thread that goes through all of these horoscopes. And the thread that goes through them in Baker's Dictionary of Astrology is the massacre of the innocent. We talked about it when we did Hillary's chart, and I parsed it, I interpreted it as Benghazi, but there were other critical events that took place where other people were killed, and it was all kind of brushed under the carpet. We said that with Fauci's, he had that particular aspect in his horoscope, and it parsed a little bit differently, but it was the same interpretation verbally. That can happen in astrology. You can have two completely different signs in two completely different compartments of the horoscope, different houses, and they can have the same or very similar meaning. And it's just something that you have to learn. Joe Biden has it. And the thing that struck me, I was curious about his horoscope because I'd never done it before. We had done Obama's, I've got it over here somewhere. But the thing that was significant to me was the stellium of planets in Scorpio in the 12th house. And there is one here, planet in the 11th house, but it's on the distal cusp, which means it's very near the 12th house. The 12th house the 12th house means many things. The 12th house, in this instance that we're talking about tonight, is the house of secrets and self-undoing, 12th house. It also tells us something about the previous life, the life before this one. Hillary, can we just slide that out of the way there, Julie? Thanks. Hillary has 4 planets in the 12th house. Biden has 4 planets in the 12th house with a 5th Scorpio, as I said earlier, on the cusp, the distal cusp of the 11th house, which makes it even more significant. But they both have Sun in Scorpio, different degrees, of course. They both have Vulcan in Scorpio. They have Mercury in Scorpio, as you would expect, and they have Venus in Scorpio in the 12th house. So I thought as a matter of interest, and people are already asking about, Kamala Harris's horoscope, which we may do next week. We'll see how far we get through this lecture this week, but also Donald Trump's, which we'll do in the future. I had an unusual experience with Trump's horoscope, and I did also with Obama's. Very interesting stuff. And by that, I mean I was able to perceive and look into their past lives that helped influence this life. Obama's life back in the early part of American history that influenced this life and influenced him in what we call atavism. It's where a previous life was so powerful and so influential that it affects you hundreds of years later in an incarnation. I used to marvel when I was a young guy. I'd walk through the airports and back in the whatever it was, the 70s and the 80s, and there'd be all these Hare Krishna guys in there. And why would they waste their time doing that? And they seem so comfortable with it. You don't see it anymore, but you saw a spurt of it. And a lot of it is because they had previous lives that were very powerful and influenced them as Hindus and as Hare Krishna students. And they incarnated as a group in America and throughout the world. It wasn't just in the airports in America that you saw. You want to sit down there? Are you comfortable?
I am fine.
You're fine.
Okay. Yes.
So anyway, what I'm going to do to try to simplify this for everybody is we're going to look at these aspects, and we're going to start here. No, we're going to start here and work our way down. And I'll explain what the dictionary, what David Zimmerman says, what the dictionary of astrology tells us in its sacred language of what these planets mean. I might also add that one of the great mysteries 500 years ago, at the time of William Shakespeare, when the plays and the sonnets were written, William Shakespeare did not write those plays and sonnets. He was illiterate. I had a life at that time in Stratford, England, and was within the periphery of the events that are called the Shakespearean plays and sonnets. And it was an amazing thing for me to travel to England 20 some years ago and go to Anne Hathaway's house. It had a powerful familiarity with it for me, and also for my oldest sister, who I had known from a very young age, that we had both had lives in England at that time. Anyway, what I want to do is we're going to start here. We'll kind of go backwards a little bit, but we'll go down here and then we'll go around, and some of them are somewhat inconsequential, but with the events that are coming in the next a week from today, will be September 1st, and there's a deadline in Afghanistan for people to get out. So what I want to do is I want to talk about Mars and Scorpio in the 11th house, and the interpretation of Mars and Scorpio is bloody karma, a massacre of the innocent. This obviously pertains to the Afghan people. Mercury and Scorpio in the 12th interprets in the dictionary of astrology, right there, as being held captive. Who's being held captive? Did you see those pictures today? There's a long trench, a wall, and these people are standing in what appears to be water, but is actually urine. They have to go to the bathroom someplace. So they're willing to stand in urine and feces for hours and hours to get out of Afghanistan, up to their waist, in human waste, to get out of that place. That's what you call a hellhole. So here we are, being held captive, 12th house. Remember, the 12th house is the house of secrets and the house of self-undoing. I have some ideas about some of the secrets of the 12th house. Vulcan and Scorpio in the 12th. It parses as guilty words. A bomb, an atomic bomb, or a bomb keeps coming up in his horoscope.
Biden.
What?
Biden.
Biden. Yeah, this is Biden's horoscope, Joe Biden. So, Sun in Scorpio in the 12th house parses as secrecy. It's Hillary's, exactly Hillary's. Secrecy, scandal, failure, steeped in secrets, Arab fundamentalism. And the thing that blew me away was the Caine Mutiny. If you remember the story of the Caine Mutiny, there were several movies, one with Charles Lawton and Clark Gable, which was the best one. And then Marlon Brando made a movie of Mutiny on the Bounty back in maybe in the 70s, 1970s, I think sometime, late 60s, early 70s. But it was a story where the people under the command of the admiral of the boat, the captain, whatever he was of the boat, mutinied and overthrew him. So he has this mutinous thing that could happen in his horoscope. We say that it's in the realm of possibility. For me, the astrology is so accurate that when I interpret it, I just don't even, I don't cast any dispersions on it. But people don't like it because they think it means predestination. What we're saying is that it's within the realm of possibility. So let's see what happens. Venus in Scorpio in the distal cusp of the 12th house, and Sagittarius on the ascendant. Huge Sagittarius on the ascendant means huge aspirations. He has aspirations. Sagittarius is normally, its home is in the 9th house. He's got Leo there. He's Leonine, about it's square to the 9th house. He's enthralled with power, and Hillary too. They share that very common thing. You would expect that people, birds of a feather, we say, flock together. So this is an important aspect. And it has some interesting meanings. Mars is the esoteric ruler of Scorpio, and Mars, it rules short-term karma that is bloody and violent, bloody karma. It parses as brusque, to be curt, blunt, and abrupt. He oftentimes will speak and walk away from the camera and go out the door and won't take any questions. Donald Trump would take questions till the cows came home. You wish he wouldn't sometimes, but he would take just an onslaught of questions. Joe turns around and walks away. He's abrupt, offhand in speech and manner. Bloodstain is an interpretation of Venus and Scorpio in the 12th, but the primary word that parses in the horoscope of astrology is chaos. The world is, and Afghanistan is in chaos, and it's a chaos that he created by a kind of doing everything bass backwards, we say. He should have gotten the people out first that they wanted to get out, the Americans and the allies to the military forces, and then got the equipment out, and then the military last. And he was trying to get the military out first. It's completely backwards. So you have to deal with that. Now, we're moving up to the 10th house. He's got Neptune and Libra in the 10th, and Hillary has it in the proximal cusp of the 11th house, Neptune and Libra. And it parses as a miscarriage of justice. This is what the dictionary says. Retiring from office, a mourning. There's a possibility of mourning, of some, who knows, the loss of lives in Afghanistan. We'll see. Also, a tipping. These are the scales of justice, is Libra, liberty, library. There are many words that evolve from the astrological word Libra or Libra. I always say Libra because that's what the way they pronounce it in England, and that's where I was trained. Anyway, so a miscarriage of justice. Retiring from office. Before it's over with, he'll retire. He won't make it 3 years. It's impossible. The blood stain of Mars, and again, the incredible chaos that's happening here in Afghanistan that could have been averted. The tipping of the scales of justice has been one of the big complaints of the Republicans, is there's a lack of justice and fairness in things that are going in Washington, D.C. I might add this, that the thing that's important to remember is as we approach this new age, the Aquarian age, fourth ray energy is coming in. It's being recharged, re-energized, and it will bring city-state government that existed back in the Renaissance period 500 years ago. And the city-state government is what, in the final analysis, will drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. It'll be city-state government because the government of Washington will be decentralized. And the power will be given back to the states. And that's what's going to happen with fourth ray energy, is the creation of city, state, and regional governments. Again, the ninth house with Leo, we talked about it earlier, and with Sagittarius on the horizon, or the rising sign in Sagittarius, is big aspirations. He had always aspired for power in politics, and his whole life has been spent in nothing but politics. It's all he's ever done. I used to complain at General Motors years ago because they'd have all these executives who, that's all they ever did was work at General Motors. They never had a real job, They just came to General Motors. And so I asked them one time, had a huge, they called it the war room. And it was not a real big room, but it had a giant table that was almost as big as the room, big walnut table down by the library there on the second floor of General Motors Design Center. And they would hold these, what they deemed important meetings. And I can remember asking one of the executives, and it really, really upset him, boy. I said, have you ever worked anyplace else other than here? And he wouldn't answer because he hadn't. That's all he knew. See? And so they lacked worldly experience. at General Motors, they'd hire these guys in from college or universities and throw them in and pay them a ridiculous salary, and they just became like the bureaucrat. They were bureaucrats. And the amazing thing that happened for me that you'll see in Washington when you see these politicians and the bureaucrats on TV, that's all they know. They don't have real world experience, which is one of the reasons why they could make these horrible mistakes that are sudden. The Scorpio rules things that are sudden, out of the dark, unexpected. And so here Joe's got 5 planets in Scorpio, and Hillary's got 4 over here. So he had these huge aspirations, and so did Hillary. Hillary had tremendous aspirations in her horoscope, indicated here in the 9th house. In fact, her aspirations were so immense that Baker had commissioned an artist to draw a picture of Mount Rushmore with Hillary's face carved in the stone at Mount Rushmore. And he said, Baker told me, that she believed that she should be carved in stone along with Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln and Roosevelt. And he commissioned this drawing to be done. Of course, that we know that will never happen, but it was her aspirations were so huge that she envisioned it, and it shows it in her horoscope in this 9th house of aspiration. It's got an interception in here in Aquarius, and she had tremendous upheaval near the end of her political career, which we could safely say is now over with. Let me see what else we've got here on Joe Biden. We've got, what do we have? We got about 10 or 15 minutes left. It's in the 8th house. It's in the 8th house. You know, see if you can kind of can you get both me and the thing here so I can point it out to them. So it says when you parse the aspects in the horoscope, Pluto in Leo retrograde, Pluto in Leo, massacre of the innocent. I said that Hillary's massacre of the innocent was Benghazi, where these men were left to die. They had no chance. Horrible things happened to Chris Stevens, the guy that was sent over there to clean up a mess. I have a document, excuse me, that was sent to me about what the root cause was behind the Benghazi incident. And it is absolutely frightening of the mistakes that these bureaucrats make and how bad their judgment really is. But the massacre of the innocent is in the 8th house with Pluto Leo retrograde. Also pornography, and he has the exact same interpretation as Fauci. The delinquent is out on the JAG. A JAG in the military is the Judge Adjutant General. We talked about that in Fauci's horoscope, which makes you wonder that there could be a potential there for some sort of a military tribunal that would come about. They're talking about it in Europe. We only get the news in America, but it's extraordinary stuff. He also, with Pluto in Leo, Leo the lion, in retrograde, sees himself as a czar. And it also parses as there is more to it than there appears to be in Joe's horoscope. With Jupiter in Cancer, in the 8th house, this is straight from the dictionary. needs an infusion of the macho qualities. Joe Biden needs an infusion. Right now, if you watch the news and what's going on, he's caving in. He's caving in to the Taliban, giving them anything they want. And so it would be good if he could be a little more macho. But it's not in him because he has no will raise in his personality or in his soul. He's what we call love ray, mostly love rays. Oh, Uncle Joe. Oh, he's such a great guy. He's so likable. But that doesn't get you anything when you're negotiating with terrorists. There are times, absolutely, when you cannot and should not turn the other cheek. Sometimes you have to stand up to evil. And what we're experiencing there is planetary evil. We talked about it a little bit earlier and at the dinner table. We talked about it last week before. We talked about the Atlas Mountains and about Churchill and Roosevelt in a bell tower overlooking the Atlas Mountains at sunset. And it was a symbolic gesture on the part of Churchill that the enemies, the Axis forces, had been defeated. They knew, Churchill knew, Roosevelt knew, when Churchill had these big burly army guys, soldiers, carry Roosevelt, who was crippled from polio, always sat in a wheelchair, carried him, wheelchair and all, up into the bell tower of this beautiful old white stuccoed church in Morocco, overlooking the Atlas Mountains. If you're a theosophist and you've read the writings of Madame Blavatsky, then you know what she says about the Atlas Mountains. It is incredible writings on the forces of evil who dwell in subterranean basins and caves under the Atlas Mountains, and that they are in astral form. They're, Blavatsky said, the descendants of the practitioners of black magic during the time of Atlantis, which really destroyed Atlantis. There was a great war. There's a great war in World War II between the good and the evil. There is a great war again, what we're calling, many of us, Alice Bailey talked about it, World War III, the war between good and evil. And a large part of it's being fought on the mental planes. Alice Bailey, said in her writings that the World War III would be fought in the clouds, she said, meaning in the airwaves through television, which was almost non-existent, and the internet, which didn't exist at all, but was envisioned by her that somehow the airwaves would be used and it would be psychological. A large part of it would be a psychological war. And that's what we're experiencing with the news, where the news is completely corrupt and one-sided in most cases. There's a kind of a unusual aspect here in the seventh house of partnership, because it shows Saturn is retrograde in Gemini. And of course, Saturn is long-term karma. Gemini is dualistic, or it splits and divides into two. His first wife died. It's the house of partnerships and marriage and business. His first wife died and he remarried a woman, Dr. Jill Biden, who has been very loving and caring for him. And that's a fortunate thing. The retrograde aspect means you get another chance. That isn't always good. My sister-in-law married and divorced her first husband twice. and then married my oldest brother. But it means getting a second chance, often to it. Anyway, I don't know if we should talk about some of these things in a refresher from Hillary's horoscope or not. I think you find it interesting, and I'll try to read off some of these aspects. I'm going to have to move my chair up just a little bit, Yvonne. So I hope you can see it. Okay? I had a tremendous amount of work that I put into her horoscope. The information that I was able to extract from Hillary's horoscope was voluminous, to say the least. And we'll just hit a few of these things here. Don't even know where to start. Again, secrecy in the 12th house. Scandal, steeped in secrets, massacre of the innocent, a previous life as a high-ranking Gestapo officer, Hillary Clinton. I was able, through occult means, through conscious mediumship, I don't know what else to call it. I've had many experiences in conscious mediumship. One of my most famous ones was 10 days before 9/11, when the towers collapsed. I sat on the other side of that wall in my den, right there in that corner on the other side of the wall, in my meditation chair. And when I came out of meditation, I looked at the end of the green sofa that's in the room there, and I saw the scale models of the World Trade Towers. They were about this high, and I watched them implode. And I tried to rationalize what was happening. But I had been told 2 weeks earlier outside of Naples, Italy, by a powerful teacher, that I would begin to have experiences in conscious mediumship. Went right over my head. Know what he was talking about. I flew out of Rome the next day to Detroit. It was the middle of August 2001. I had 1 or 2 days of vacation. I went back to work, and then less than 2 weeks later was Labor Day weekend, which was the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of September that year. So I was home alone. I didn't have my daughter or my son. And I decided to spend quiet time. You know, Dave needs quiet time. We all need quiet time. It was the Master's Moria, I believe it was, of Kutumi, that said that the thing that was lacking most in modern day people's lives is quietness, silence, to live in silence. Baker used to say, if you can't meditate, learn to sit in silence, because silence disseminates the soul. And so I was experiencing 3 days of silence. I think I left the house one time. I'd never really done anything quite like that before, but it seemed there was a certain kind of an air of reverence that I had for the house and the solitude of the house, which is it's a comfortable home to live in for me. And I was just enjoying my solitude. And it was early in the morning, and I was meditating, and I saw this image of the trade towers collapsing. But it was through this conscious kind of an awareness that it became known to me that Hillary Clinton in her previous life was Martin Bormann. And Martin Bormann was an interesting character because he had aspired to Hitler's position. He was almost a benign character in a way. He was like a guy who was in back of the crowd of the other Nazis. But his aspirations, after Reinhold Heinrich was killed, if you know the German history of the Nazi Party, the heir to the throne of Hitler was a young guy named Reinhard Heinrich. And in The Spear of Destiny, the book that we talked about several weeks ago, where they talk about Hitler and his obsession with the spear that was used by the Roman gladiator Gaius Cassius to kill Christ on the cross, to end his suffering as an act of mercy. He took his spear, he was blind and beat up from countless battles in the Roman legion, and he ended Jesus's life. And that spear point was a talisman of power. And they believed in the Germanic tribes that whoever owned that spear could rule the world. And Hitler wanted the spear, which was in the Hofbrau Museum in Vienna, Austria. It's still there today, but he was able to get it. And it had a powerful meaning to him. So Martin Bormann, when Hitler finally killed himself, and he did kill himself, we showed his skull, which was an interesting thing to talk about because of the apparent patency of the cranial sutures of Hitler's skull, proved that he was a meditator and that he was able to maintain the elasticity of these cranial sutures, which meant that his brain was still expanding, even at the age of 56. 57, however old he was when he died. But Martin Bormann was left, all the other top Nazis. And so he was by default, Martin Bormann was the heir apparent to the Third Reich, which was in shambles. And it was a previous life of Hillary Clinton. We talked about Obama's previous incarnation. I have a PowerPoint we could play here on the television of Obama's previous life, which Baker told me was the life of Thomas Jefferson. And the thing that's interesting about the life of Thomas Jefferson was that he raised a family of mulatto children. He didn't free them until his death. They were given their freedom. It's interesting that Obama, if he was in fact Thomas Jefferson, incarnated as a mulatto. And it shows in his horoscope he's not happy about it. He was especially unhappy with his mother. But we'll talk about Obama's horoscope at a later date, and we may show the PowerPoint of the life of Thomas Jefferson and the absolutely astounding parallels between Thomas Jefferson's incarnation and Obama's, as well as I'm going to have a PowerPoint. Bonnie Turner, my saint in Seattle, Washington, who puts my PowerPoints together for me. I'm going to have her put a PowerPoint together on Donald Trump and a previous life of his, which was the life of Andrew Jackson, the seventh president of the United States.
David,
The parallels are extraordinary.
our time is about to be up. I think
Okay.
we should ask questions maybe.
Okay, yeah, time for questions. Yeah, I've kind of overextended the limit, but if there's any questions, anybody here in our classroom in Rochester Hills, Michigan, or anybody who's on Zoom?
Dave, would you put out the address, the web address for Claregate College?
Yeah, I think you can go to douglasbaker.org.
Oh, okay.
douglasbaker.org, the college now only exists on the internet. It has not really continued since Baker's death. We're hoping to get it restarted one of these days soon. There'll be a physical college once again, but we do have online courses and study, and the books and the tapes are available, and you can check it out. Anybody else? I know it's a
Yes, hi.
lot of information. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Jean. I'm wondering if Biden or Hillary or any of them will have a day of reckoning in the future for all their diabolical deeds.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they will. We got to get through what we're involved in right now. But the truth, time sustains truth. And it's just a matter of time and the truth will all come out. The inner forces of the planet say that everything is working according to plan. That's what they're telling us. And it's sometimes hard to believe, but there will be retribution for whatever their sins are in this incarnation. That's all I can tell you.
David, I have a question. Jeff Crone here. What is our
Yeah.
job as a being at this time in this point in our history and this place? What is our job right now?
Well, your job is the same as it's always been. It's to practice harmlessness and to live as a soul and not as a personality. That means soul integration. The symbol of soul integration is the Jewish Star of David, where the star ascendant triangle and the descendant triangle merge in the middle, and they create the six-pointed star. It's just the symbol of an integrated personality. And that was the great feat. It's said in the esoteric teachings that the Jewish people had accomplished. It doesn't mean that all Jews have integrated personalities, but at one time, in biblical times, that may have been the case. Integration of the soul into the personality into the soul, living as a soul in the world. And that's what our job is ultimately. Each of us has a purpose, and it shows in our horoscope. I don't have my horoscope here right now, but it's a real good example of explaining in easy and understandable terms. We'll do that maybe next week. There are three quadrants in the horoscope, and it's whatever the sign is on the ascendant, the rising sign, and its esoteric ruler. So we look for where that is. And then the sign that's on the cusp, where we find the esoteric ruler of the rising sign. It's a triangulation of these three things. So we say that here's Sagittarius. The earth is the ruler of Sagittarius. Taurus is on the cusp, and then we look for the esoteric ruler of Taurus, and we can then calculate a purposeful meaning to their life indicated in that way. But the most essential thing is the sign, not the sun sign, but the rising sign points the direction to the soul's purpose. You have to have that.
Okay, thank you.
So if Vulcan is the esoteric ruler of Taurus, then you look for Vulcan, and Vulcan is in the 12th house. Yeah.
Did Joe Biden have a previous incarnation?
Yeah, of course we all did. We all do. But I don't know what his was.
Okay.
I haven't been given that. I haven't had any insights into it. I might if I think enough about it, but
Mhm.
I got too much other stuff going on right
Did you
It was-
say he had that karma, like violent, bloody karma, or that was
Joe,
Joe? Yeah, you were saying he
Yeah.
has a karma, but I wasn't clear about if it's a short term or long term, or if it's violent karma. And how do you see that?
Mars is short-term karma and Saturn is long-term karma.
Mhm.
When the two are put together, you get bloody, violent karma. Mars itself can be bloody and violent, but if Saturn is also there, it means it's from a long time ago. So Joe has Mars, he has a short-term karma in the 11th house, and the 11th house is the house of groups. It's ruled by Aquarius, the 11th house. He's ruled by Jupiter, I mean. And the Aquarius is the normal home for Aquarius, and its natural ruler is Jupiter, which is the most benign of all of the planets. But he has a short-term karma here that's violent and bloody. I don't know how it will manifest itself. Old Joe Kennedy, the great mystery of the Kennedy family was that they were a group of Roman Caesars who had violent history, and they reincarnated as a family to pay off their karma from Roman lives. And that's why they were all killed. And
Did they have the long term karma?
Yeah.
Okay.
they had both
Oh.
long-term, and they had bloody, violent karma. They were killed. One son was blown up in a plane that was loaded with explosives and on a secret mission. And the irony was the old man, old Joe, was, if I remember correctly, he was Julius Caesar. And he was a terrible guy. And they say that he was almost single-handedly responsible for the great stock market crash in 1929. I had a Catholic priest. I've told some of you about it before. My family went Catholic, but I lived in a little town. It was mostly Catholics. And the priest used to come to our house on Sunday for dinner. My mother would make these tremendous chicken dinners.
It's like
Absolutely out of this world. And the old priest, Father Lothamer was his name, he would come to the house. He and my dad were buddies, and he loved my mother. And it was just a real good kind of an environment. But he knew, when he was a young guy, he knew old Joe Kennedy. And he used to tell stories. He was in the Boston diocese. It was where he started out, and he knew Joe Kennedy. And he knew a lot of people that were in politics at that time. And Joe Kennedy was aspiring, he had tremendous aspirations and wanted to be the president of the United States. And he was running on the ticket, you can look it up, it's historical, it's documented, against Al Smith, who was a New York politician. And he got beat out by Al Smith. So Joe decided that he would have his son, Joe Jr. He was going to make Joe Jr. the president, first Catholic president of the United States. And then Joe in World War II was on in a plane filled with explosive on a secret mission that he had volunteered for. And they did some kind of static electricity or lightning, and it blew the plane to complete smithereens. There wasn't anything left of anybody or the plane. It fell into the ocean, what was left of it. So then the aspirations of the father fell upon the son, John F. Kennedy. And we made a film. I've got a DVD of it on the horoscope of the Kennedys. and the family, and it shows the karma. It's incredible. It's the horoscope of John F. Kennedy Jr. We made it right after he had died. In fact, I had financed it, and produced it. And we'll do that sometimes, really interesting. And it's just so accurate. It's just staggering, it really is to think about. Anyway,
It's almost 8. We have 1 more minute, so I don't know if
you have
anybody.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Anybody got a question? It's a lot to think about.
Yeah, you know, Joe Kennedy got most of his fortune from running bootlegging,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
and Joe is connected to a lot of mafia stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
you know,
It's the way business is done. Okay, well, listen, we'll say goodnight to our Zoom audience and tune in next week. It'll be another interesting subject. And we can talk here for a minute, or we can go up into the living room.
Thank you
And,
very much, David.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for
you.
tuning in, everyone.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Who's this?
Yeah. This is Christine.
Oh,
And
Christine.
yes. And Dom and George are here.
All right.
Hi, Dave, from Christina and Brian. We enjoyed it.
Okay, good. Yeah, hi, Christine. Hi,
See you
Brian.
later.
Okay,
Thank
next
you,
week, same
David.
time,
Thank you,
same
David.
place. All right,
Thank you, David. So,
all right,
Yes, appreciate being with you finally.
okay. Is that Paola, Rosa?
No, this is
Nancy?
Jean. Got
Oh,
a
Jean.
late start, but I'm with you.
Jean Ross, okay. Yeah, I just sent that notice to you earlier, so you'll be on the permanent list.
Thank you. I find them very interesting.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, David. Bye,
Bye-bye.
David.
Who's this?
This is Amira.
Oh, Amir, how are you?
Amir.
How are you, dear? Okay, good night, folks.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
All right,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you.